No one watches elite competitive running. A little while ago, I made a video about why I think elite running is rarely viewed or talked about as a sport in pop culture, despite it being such a universally recognised activity. Here I argued that athletics bodies need to market the runners in a more interesting fashion, and focus on the personalities and rivalries that are competing in each race to build up hype and get more eyes on the sport. This could be done through many ways, such as interviews, documentary series and press conferences to help audiences connect more with athletes and their story. But I want to focus on something else that people in the sport can be doing, which I think would help build more long-term and steady success in the personal brands of the athletes and the sport itself. I want to use the example of how YouTube channels can be used to connect the audience to the individual athletes, and get them watching running more often. In my previous video I argued that this should be done through rivalries and getting different personalities to conflict with each other in the race. And whilst this would definitely help for the short-term success of the sport, I don't know if it would have the same long-term effect that we're looking for. Because once the rivalry is over, the people who only watch the sport because of that rivalry will no longer have any interest. But if we encourage athletes to get their own following and to bring people into the sport to follow them as an athlete, then it has much more long-term success, as whenever that athlete races, people are going to tune in just to see that athlete. For example, I may be interested in watching Josh Kerr because of his rivalry with Jakob Ingebrigtsen, but if he has his own following, then I'm going to be interested to watch him just for the sake of watching Josh Kerr, because I'm invested in his story and I want him to succeed individually as an athlete. My being invested in watching running is not based on one single rivalry, but on the longevity of an entire athlete, and that would mean we don't need to have some mega crazy, super hyped rivalry between athletes for people to watch the sport. We just need a single athlete to be racing, because people will tune in just to watch that athlete in particular race. And hopefully within that time I can find other athletes that I also enjoy watching and then build from there. I was heavily inspired to make this video by a channel called The Distance Project, which is run by British middle distance runner Callum Elson. Here he documents his running journey of trying to break into international running competitions, being right now as what he describes as a sub-elite national runner. Callum makes his videos very grounded by showing the good, the bad and the ugly of his running career. Whether it be the highs of winning a major race that will qualify him for national level competition, to the lows of travelling abroad for a race just to pull out due to illness minutes before the race starts. Callum has recently pivoted his content to focus on recovering from an Achilles tear that he suffered whilst racing, and he has now started to spotlight other runners such as marathon runner Becky Briggs. He has openly said that one of the main purposes of the channel is to try and grow the sport by creating stories that people can connect to, meaning they're more likely to follow the runners and the sport itself. And this sort of unfiltered, gritty style of content allows him to show his personality more.
WrestleMania 16? Huh? You can't just blow me, fella. Jesus Christ, put me in lane 4, lad.
Which means the audience can get invested in him as a person. And this is relating back to what I said in my previous video, which is that a good story is the most important thing for getting the average person into a sport, not just the sport itself. Unless you're a running nerd, which to be fair you might be if you watch this channel, very few people are going to want to watch 30 minutes of someone running around in circles, unless you give them characters and a story to get invested in. And in my case this has worked spectacularly. For someone who loves running so much, I watch very little races throughout the year, because quite frankly I don't have much investment in the story of most of the athletes. Obviously when big names like Kipchoge or Cheptegei or Ingebrigtsen are involved, there's naturally a bit more interest in watching these races because of their name value, but that's more just because of their elite ability rather than because I'm really invested in their particular story. And their ability only really appeals to me because I am a runner myself, and they're competing in the most prestigious running events in the world. Whilst Callum does boast a very fast 1500 meter time, he's not by any means close to being the best in the world. And if I hadn't come across his channel, I wouldn't care about watching his races in a million years. Yet watching his videos have allowed me a detailed insight into his story and to connect with his personality, which has meant that I've now been more excited to watch him as maybe the 6th ranked, I think it was, British middle distance runner, than to watch the races of some of the greatest 1500 meter athletes there are in the world right now, such as Jakob Ingebrigtsen. And it's not that I dislike Ingebrigtsen, I just know little more about him except that he's a crazy fast and talented Norwegian runner that only generates so much interest. At first I thought this was maybe just me liking Callum's personality and just gravitating to him naturally, but he recently made a new series on British marathon runner Becky Briggs. I'd never heard of her or even shown much interest in women's running to begin with, and yet I found her story compelling as a result of Callum's videos on her. And as I keep repeating in this video, it's got me invested in her personality and therefore her story as an athlete. I wouldn't exaggerate and say that I'd sit through a 2-hour marathon to see her results, but a 2-part series has changed me from someone who would never really follow women's running to actively being interested in Becky Briggs' career. Now imagine if athletes began doing this on a much larger scale. Whereas the trailers and rivalries I focused on in the previous video helped generate short-term success and publicity for the sport, fleshing out athletes' personalities and backstory allows for more sustained viewership and interest. These fans would likely also be more loyal and willing to pay for in-person tickets, allowing for bigger running events and better prize pools for the athletes, who train so hard every day. For current fans, it would allow us to appreciate the runners for the people they are, as well as their incredible athletic ability. It would also give us insight into the rawer side of what it's like to be a professional runner. This has already been done by people like Callum, and there are some other elite athletes doing these sorts of videos, like Elliot Giles or Paul Chalimo. But with that being said, I want to make very clear that there is a difference between the kind of videos that I'm talking about and some of the behind the scenes training vlogs you see on YouTube. Because someone could point to the fact that there are plenty of lightly edited vlogs of raw athletes training already. The NN running team and sweat elite sessions are just some examples. I do find these videos interesting, and I think they have a place in marketing the sport, but they miss the mark in showing the athlete's personality. Many of the videos come across like a slick documentary, and you don't feel like you can really connect with the athlete very much or get invested in their story. Most of these videos are dedicated to B-roll of the athletes running, with some small interviews here and there of them explaining what they're doing. You could replace the narrations with anyone and you'd broadly get the same effect. If we contrast with the style of video that Callum and others make, there is much more dedicated to the interviews of the athletes talking about their experiences with running, how they're feeling in the moment, what are their fears for the upcoming race. And that's not a knock on Sweat Elite sessions or the NN running team documentaries. Again, I find them really interesting, but they only interest me because they concern athletes who already have a name value. I'm unlikely to watch a 20-minute Sweat Elite video on how an athlete trains unless I know the athlete already. I'm not going to pretend that there aren't limitations to the idea I'm proposing. For one, this is something that takes a lot of time and effort on everyone's part. YouTube is something you need to be in for the long haul to see real success, so this isn't something that we'd see the effects of overnight, even if randomly every elite runner suddenly started making YouTube videos. Hopefully if some of the biggest runners started this kind of thing, then their name value could help them amass an audience quickly. There's also the fact that athletes need to focus on training and competition and not filming themselves on YouTube. Stephen Scully, an Irish marathon runner, has recently come out and said that he thinks his YouTube channel was a key reason in him not being able to qualify for the Olympics this year.
This entire journey, probably, getting one of these and how this probably cost me, if we're being honest, that, I spotted this year's Paris Olympics.
And I think this is where the governing bodies, media companies and marketing agencies need to step in here. If they can provide athletes with a small team or even just a single cameraman who films the athletes day to day, the athlete can still train without having to worry about creating content. And that hopefully means that their training and competition won't be affected. This could give us stuff which is similar to the Drive to Survive type documentaries that have become so popular. Netflix has just released their Sprint documentary, which I'm hoping is going to be a really big step forward for this kind of thing, and do what Drive to Survive did for Formula 1, for sprinting. Of course, sprinting is different to distance events, but I still think it's a step in the right direction. I've watched the first episode of it, and I'm going to spend the next couple of days watching it so I can kind of give a review on this channel and see if it does really get you invested in the storylines of athletes. So look forward to that hopefully early next week. And this sort of gritty vlog or documentary style is something that I'd be interested in creating as well. So in the off chance that someone who's connected to any athletes is interested in something like this, then feel free to leave a comment down below and we can get talking. I think another way that content creators can help do this is making videos on certain races that are coming up and explaining the stakes to a casual audience and why they should care. Something I'll definitely experiment with myself, especially since the Prefontaine Classic is coming up. But thank you very much for watching the video and let me know what you think in the comments below. It's a topic I'm definitely passionate about. I enjoy making videos and sort of giving my thoughts on this stuff quite a lot. It was really nice to see all the feedback and positive comments I got from the previous one, so thank you very much for that. But with that being said, thank you again for watching the video. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and happy training.